In the age of information where every idea competes for attention, one man has risen to prominence, captivating the minds of millions with his insights on culture, politics, and the human condition. Dr. Jordan Peterson, a Canadian clinical psychologist and public intellectual, has become a controversial figure as he navigates the complex web of human beliefs and ideologies. Over the past decade, Peterson has gained popularity by expressing his opinions on topics that fall outside of his area of expertise, including everything from climate change to economics. As a result, he has made several statements that have sparked uproar and controversy among experts in those fields.
The environment, I don't even know what that is. That's everything. The environment. I'm concerned about the environment. It's like, how is that different than saying I'm worried about everything?
Amidst his many viewpoints and opinions, Peterson has ventured into the realm of evolutionary psychology, seeking to explain human behavior through the lens of our ancient past. However, there is a peculiar dissonance between the claims he makes and the intricate realities of the field. The purpose of this video is to analyze how Peterson utilizes specific aspects of evolutionary psychology to justify his hierarchical and traditionalist perspectives on the world, either to reinforce his personal beliefs or to cater to the preferences of his audience. As a response to the growing complexity of the modern world, a scientific discipline began to emerge in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. One that sought to understand and explain the inner workings of the human mind, including our behaviors, emotions, and cognitive processes, by drawing on the principles of evolution and natural selection. This approach to psychology uses the principles of evolution and natural selection to explain how our mental faculties have developed and evolved over time. Evolutionary psychology offers compelling narratives about human nature. It tells us that our desires, fears, and even our social behaviors are not the byproducts of culture and upbringing alone, but echoes from our primal past, and that the stories that we tell ourselves about love, power, and morality are deeply rooted in the survival strategies of our ancient ancestors.
Isn't environment really more important?
Of course, environment is enormously important. Every gardener knows that plants grow better when they're watered and tended. And your good health and your good looks are partly due to good genes, but they're also due to good food and happy surroundings. You're a product of both your heredity and your environment.
But the significance of the discipline lies in both its revelations and its limitations. While it sheds light on human behavior, it also underscores the importance of considering non-evolutionary factors that may influence it, highlighting the need for a multifaceted approach when attempting to understand or explain human behavior. In the past, some groups have leveraged biological explanations of human behavior with harmful intentions. For example, the eugenics movement in the early 1900s and the Nazi Party are both examples of groups that distorted and manipulated scientific principles to promote harmful and destructive ideologies centered around racism, classism, and ableism. If evolutionary psychology is misunderstood or misrepresented in a similar manner, it can perpetuate harmful stereotypes by portraying them as natural or inevitable.
When breaking in any new worker, and of course especially a woman, you've got to explain every angle of the process down to the last detail. You see, they're not naturally familiar with mechanical principles nor machines.
On the other hand, if a span flam is wanted, that's single right-handed, providing the pressing puncture is adjusted to the conch front of 37 and 2/8. Is that clear?
This approach overlooks the impact of social and environmental factors, as it portrays us as being solely shaped by our genetic inheritance, neglecting our potential for personal growth and transformation, as well as our comprehension of ethical principles. Because biological explanations of human nature have been misused, some experts and academic fields remain skeptical of such explanations. But the truth is far more complicated. Evolutionary psychology has illuminated our understanding of human behavior in fascinating ways. So before we delve into Jordan Peterson's interpretation of evolutionary psychology, Let me first provide you with a few concrete examples of its findings. This will give you a solid foundation to reference as we move forward.
The human brain is unique in its abilities to explore, to create, to adapt, and to think about itself. One might imagine that it is completely unlike anything else on Earth. And yet, in structure, it is not so unique. In fact, it bears a long evolutionary heritage. Neurons are seen even in very primitive, brainless animals, like the jellyfish. The brains of many vertebrate animals have a basic structure similar to that of our own. By looking at their brains, we learn about ours.
An important discovery to examine is the mismatch hypothesis, which provides insights into how certain human traits and behaviors that were once advantageous in our ancestral environment may now cause hurdles in our modern world. For instance, we can observe evolutionary mismatches in the workplace, where humans spend a significant amount of time interacting with strangers in complex and hierarchical environments. The workplace environment we inhabit today stands in stark contrast to the small and egalitarian societies in which our hunter-gatherer ancestors evolved and thrived for a significant portion of our evolutionary history. The stress response system, which evolved to respond to immediate threats and opportunities, is often overstimulated by modern work culture, leading to burnout, conflicts, and poor management practices. Another example of the findings of evolutionary psychology can be seen in the study of risk-taking behavior in humans. In ancestral environments, engaging in risky behaviors could have offered adaptive advantages such as acquiring food, exploring new territories, or mate selection. However, when applied to various modern risks, risk-taking behaviors are no longer beneficial and often lead to negative consequences such as injuries, illness, or even death. And the third example we will examine within the field of evolutionary psychology, particularly in the domain of social and group living, is the concept of social comparison. This behavior's origins are deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. Social comparison is an integral part of human behavior, and it stems from the tendency to establish social dynamics within groups. Those who were higher up the social ladder had more access to resources, potential mates, and were more likely to pass their genes onto the next generation. However, in our modern society, social comparison often leads to negative psychological outcomes. With the advent of social media and the internet, we are no longer just comparing ourselves to our immediate social circle, but to a global network of people, many of whom carefully curate and present highly idealized versions of their lives. This constant exposure to others' highlight reels can lead to feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, and distorted perceptions of beauty and wealth. This, once again, underscores the importance of the mismatch hypothesis. A trait that was once beneficial to our survival, social comparison, can have detrimental effects in the context of our modern environment. These powerful ideas help us understand a small portion of the intricate and lengthy story of our species, reminding us that understanding our past is a tool for shaping our future, not a prison that confines us to repeating it. Now that we've examined some examples of evolutionary psychology, let's turn our attention to Dr. Jordan Peterson. It's not without irony that Peterson, a clinical psychologist, often wanders into territories far beyond his professional scope, sometimes with an alarming disregard for the complexity and nuance of these disciplines. While I don't think it's necessary to have extensive knowledge of a highly specified field in order to be able to comment on it, I do think it's important to acknowledge the limitations of our understanding of certain fields. Peterson frequently cites the principles of evolutionary psychology to support his arguments on societal structures and gender roles. He makes sweeping generalizations about our evolutionary past, often drawing parallels with creatures such as lobsters. There are a number of issues with these arguments. First, it oversimplifies the intricacies of human behaviors and social structures by attributing them to solely biological factors. Trust me, we are going to see a lot of this in this video. He seems to overlook the fundamental fact that humans, unlike lobsters, have advanced cognitive abilities, sophisticated cultural practices, and a rich array of social interactions. not to mention the fact that humans and lobsters are too different genetically for their social hierarchies to be considered similar. Secondly, he commits the naturalistic fallacy, arguing that because something exists within nature, it must be inevitable or even desirable in human society. This is a deeply flawed argument that fails to consider the multifaceted nature of human society and the potential for change and progress. While Peterson's views on evolutionary psychology may resonate with his audiences, I have concerns. The following is a conversation between Dr. Jordan Peterson and Norwegian-Swedish talk show host Skavlan, where they discuss the influence of cultures on outcomes. It serves as a great example of how easily incomplete information regarding evolutionary psychology and biological explanations of behavior can be misinterpreted and used to spread ideological narratives.
To strive for equality of outcome is, well, it's a fool's game and likely to be it has proved to be in the past, extraordinarily dangerous, as well as impossible. So, one of the things we know, for example, is that, I don't know to what degree it's common knowledge in Scandinavia, but the biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperament and interest are in Scandinavia, and they've maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
What do you mean by that?
It means that the more egalitarian your state, the bigger the personality differences between men and women.
Even though Peterson's statement is accurate, he fails to present the full picture. The basis of his claim is a study conducted in 2016 by evolutionary psychologist Dr. David P. Schmidt and his colleagues, which suggests that in societies with greater gender equality, differences in personality traits between men and women become more pronounced. This phenomenon is known as the gender equality paradox. However, Peterson overlooks important aspects of this phenomenon, which I will elaborate on shortly.
Yeah, well, then why do you think the outcome, and these countries where the outcome is more equal, why do you think that leads to bigger differences between the sexes?
Because there's only two reasons that men and women differ. One is cultural, and the other is biological. And if you minimize the cultural differences, you maximize the biological differences.
The statement, minimizing cultural differences maximizes biological difference, is unsupported by the mentioned study and primarily reflects Peterson's political views that aim to reinforce hierarchies based on physical characteristics and reproductive roles. Peterson often advocates for traditional gender roles, where men are primarily assigned the role of providers and women are expected to primarily fulfill the role of nurturers. The traits being measured by the study are not what Peterson implies them to be. In fact, the study measures traits from the 5-factor model of personality. The study does not claim to establish a causal link between gender equality and variations in these personality traits based on gender. Instead, the data primarily observes the correlation between these two phenomena. Despite this, Peterson asserts that these disparities arise solely from biological differences between men and women, contradicting the study's own conclusion that social, ecological, developmental, and organizational factors, in addition to biological factors, can all contribute to the variations in preferences and personality traits between genders. The study makes it clear that these traits are not set in stone before birth and can vary from person to person.
That's actually one of my fields of expertise. I know the literature. And it says exactly what I said it says.
Peterson's comment appears to be an attempt to discredit his ideological opponents. He discusses how a societal structure they consider to be ideal, one where gender disparity is abolished, still results in what they perceive as avoidable gender differences. While it is true that studies indicate that there are distinct differences between men and women, such as women being more prone to stress in risky situations on average, or men being more inclined towards violence compared to women, it is important to note that psychologists accept these characteristics without implying superiority of one gender over another, or without implying that individuals are limited to behaving in any specific way. However, the underlying significance of Peterson's statement is not found in its literal meaning, but rather in its carefully orchestrated role as propaganda. It acts as a hidden signal or a dog whistle, meant to evoke imagery of traditionalist values. These values, commonly associated with women being confined to domestic roles and men holding positions of authority, are not explicitly mentioned but subtly implied. It's a clever tactic by Peterson, intended to resonate with individuals who embrace these outdated beliefs without him having to openly say anything. Lastly, Peterson's perspective oversimplifies gender by assuming it to be a binary concept. He tends to blur the lines between sex and gender, possibly because acknowledging the distinction challenges his ideological beliefs and undermines a societal hierarchy that benefits him. But if we want to fully understand the complexities of human behavior, we must consider non-binary identities as well. Now let's move on to our next clip.
It's a very rare woman who at the age of 30 doesn't consider having a child her primary desire. And the ones that don't consider that, generally, in my observation, there's something that isn't quite right in the way that they're constituted or looking at the world. Sometimes you get women who are truly non-maternal, you know, by temperament. They have a masculine temperament, disagreeable, they're not particularly compassionate, they're not maternal, they're not that interested in kids. Fair enough, man, but there aren't that many of them, and there's plenty who will not admit to themselves that that's what they most desperately want.
In this clip, Peterson makes a number of questionable statements. He asserts that nearly all women by the age of 30 have childbearing as their main goal, which constitutes a broad overgeneralization. According to research on women's life aspirations, women's goals and priorities extend beyond childbearing and include a range of objectives like career progression, personal development, and maintaining social connections. A 2018 study by marketing research company Origin found that single American women are 4 times more likely than before to prioritize building a professional career over having children. Peterson's claim that women who do not wish to have children by age 30 are psychologically abnormal is scientifically inaccurate and potentially damaging. Factors such as personal choice, knowledge of inheritable conditions, and environmental concerns can all play a role in this decision without indicating a psychological disorder. Blackstone and Stewart in 2012 found that child-free women had carefully considered their decision and reported satisfaction with their lives. Moving on to our last clip, Peterson discusses men and the way hierarchies are shaped.
Men organize hierarchies around tasks. They want to get something done. Okay, and it's something that everyone in the group wants to get done. And so as soon as they aggregate themselves towards the task, a hierarchy of competence emerges because there's individual differences. And if the group's functional, they let the guys who are better at the task rise to the top. Okay, now imagine that across tasks, there's a proclivity for some men to rise and others not to. And those would be men who are competent and generous across tasks. And so they're more likely to emerge as successful in the domain of task-related hierarchies. Men mate across and down hierarchies. Women mate across and up. They like men who are a bit older, and they like men who are a bit above them in the hierarchical game, let's say.
Okay.
Men vote on who the most valid man is, and women peel from the top.
Let's take a look at the claims Peterson makes in this clip. He discusses how men form task-based hierarchies, with the most competent rising to the top. He notes that this ability to succeed across various tasks influences their standing in the hierarchy. Hierarchies do not simply emerge based on task competency, but also through power dynamics, social influence, and individual characteristics. This point reminds us that not all men or groups behave in the same way. For instance, cultural research has shown that dominance hierarchies can be shaped around various factors, such as wealth, physical strength, or age, depending on the context. The notion that men who consistently rise to the top are both competent and generous is another generalization that fails to acknowledge other factors that may lead to success in hierarchical organizations. While these traits can provide evolutionary benefits, there are situations where individuals ascend in hierarchies through manipulation or aggression. This is clearly demonstrated in the renowned research conducted by world expert in psychopathy, Dr. Robert Hare. His work illustrates how individuals with antisocial traits frequently attain influential positions of power.
The psychopath is also very manipulative, tends to manipulate, con, and deceive other people to try and mold them into something that they can use. Remember, the psychopath is really a predator, and as a predator, you're trying to groom and put your prey in the right position for where you can make some use of this particular object, is the way they would see them.
This statement also reflects Peterson's political views, as he believes that free market capitalism, which is inherently hierarchical, supposedly results in the best outcomes for the most deserving individuals. However, anyone familiar with modern neoliberal capitalism knows that this is entirely untrue. Just look around and see who's in charge, for example. This perspective appears naive at best, and it's quite astonishing that Peterson genuinely believes it to be true. So, here we are. That was a lot of information, so if you've made it all the way to this point, give yourself a pat on the back. While Jordan Peterson's exploration of evolutionary psychology has sparked dialogue and debate, it is important to critically evaluate his interpretations in light of the broader scientific understanding of the field. Evolutionary psychology offers valuable insights into our origins and provides a framework for understanding certain aspects of human behavior. However, it is not a monolithic doctrine that justifies or supports any specific ideology or social structure. As we continue to explore and unravel the mysteries of the human mind, it's important to consider the multifaceted nature of human behavior and the many factors that influence it. By drawing on a range of disciplines and perspectives, we can develop a more comprehensive understanding of who we are as individuals and as a species. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the realm of evolutionary psychology and the viewpoints of Dr. Jordan Peterson. Remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos on psychology.